Reading through the Bible in a year, November 10th, 2 Kings 23, Hebrews chapter 5, Joel 2, and Psalm 142. Then the king sent, and all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem were gathered to him. And the king went up to the house of Yahweh, and with him all the men of Judah, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the priests and their prophets, all the people, both small and great. And he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of Yahweh. And the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before Yahweh, to walk after Yahweh, and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart and all his soul, and to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people joined in the covenant. And the king commanded Hilkiah, the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the keepers of the threshold, to bring out of the temple of Yahweh all the vessels made for Baal and for Asherah, and for all the host of heaven. And he burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and carried their ashes to Bethel. And he deposed the priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to make offerings in the high places at the cities of Judah and around Jerusalem, those who burned incense to Baal and to the sun and the moon and the constellations and all the host of heaven. And he brought out the Asherah from the house of Yahweh outside Jerusalem to the brook Kidron, and burned it at the brook Kidron, and beat it to dust, and cast the dust of it upon the graves of the common people. And he broke down the houses of the male cult prostitutes who were in the house of Yahweh, where the women wove hangings for the Asherah. And he brought all the priests out to this out of the cities of Judah, and defiled the high places where the priests had made offerings, from Geba to Beersheba. And he broke down the high places of the gates that were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on one's left at the entrance of the gate of the city. But at the gate of the city. There we go. However, the priests of the high places did not come up to the altar of the Lord, of Yahweh in Jerusalem, but they ate unleavened bread among their brothers. And he defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, that no one might burn his son or his daughter as an offering to Molech. And he removed the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun at the entrance to the house of Yahweh, by the chamber of Nathan-Melech, the chamberlain, which was in the precincts. And he burned the chariots of the sun with fire, and the altars on the roof of the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars that Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of Yahweh, he pulled down and broke in pieces, and cast the dust of them into the brook Kidron. And the king defiled the high places that were at east of Jerusalem, to the south of the mount of corruption, which Solomon, the king of Israel, had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And he broke in pieces the pillars, and cut down the Asherim, and filled their places with the bones of men. Moreover, the altar at Bethel, the high place erected by Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, that altar with the high place he pulled down and burned, reducing it to dust. He also burned the Asherah. And as Josiah turned, he saw the tombs there on the mount, and he sent and took the bones out of the tombs, and he burned them on the altar and defiled it, according to the word of Yahweh, that the man of God proclaimed, who had predicted these things all the way back when Jeroboam was still king, the first king of Israel. Not Israel, the combined nation, the separate, you know what I mean. Then he said, what is that monument that I see? And the men of the city told him, it is the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and predicted these things that you have done against the altar at Bethel. And he said, let him be. Let no man move his bones. So they left his bones alone, with the bones of the prophet who came out of Samaria. You remember that story. And Josiah removed all the shrines also of the high places that were in the cities of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had made, provoking Yahweh to anger. And he did to them according to all that he had done in Bethel. And he sacrificed all the priests of the high places who were there on the altars, and burned human bones upon them. Then he returned to Jerusalem. And the king commanded all the people, keep the Passover to Yahweh your God, as it is written in the book of the covenant. For no Passover has been kept since the days of the judges who judged Israel, or during the days of all the kings, or of the kings of Judah, the kings of Israel, or the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was kept to Yahweh in Jerusalem. Moreover, Josiah put away the mediums and the necromancers and the household gods and the idols and all the abominations that were seen in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, that he might establish the words of the law that were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of Yahweh. Before him there was no king like him, who turned to Yahweh with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, nor did any arise after him. Still, Yahweh did not turn from the burning of his great wrath, by which his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations with which Manasseh, evil King Manasseh, we just read about him, had provoked him. And Yahweh said, I will remove Judah also out of my sight, as I have removed Israel, and I will cast off this city that I have chosen, Jerusalem, and the house of which I said, my name shall dwell there. Now, the rest of the acts of Josiah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. King Josiah went to meet him, and Pharaoh Necho killed him at Megiddo as soon as he saw him. And his servants carried him dead in a chariot from Megiddo and brought him to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in his father's place. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that his fathers had done. And Pharaoh Necho put him in bonds at Riblah in the land of Hamath, that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and laid on the land a tribute of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, the king in the place of Josiah his father, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. But he took Jehoahaz away, and he came to Egypt and died there. Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land to give the money according to the command of Pharaoh. He exacted the silver and the gold of the people of the land from everyone according to his assessment, to give it to Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebediah, the daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah, and he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that his fathers had done. Now Hebrews chapter 5. The author of Hebrews continues, For every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness. Because of this, he is obligated to offer sacrifice for his own sins, just as he does for those of the people. And no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. So also Christ did not exalt himself to be made a high priest, but was appointed by him who said to him, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. As he says also in another place, You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. We talked about Melchizedek before. As mentioned in the notes here, he's referenced first in Genesis 14, verse 8. We're going to get a little strange with the wording here. I'm going to dive into it just a little bit. So, Melchizedek is listed in Scripture as the king of Salem. Well, what is Salem? Salem means peace, so he's the king of peace. Also, with him being a priest, we know nothing of his history, right? That's why in Scripture, as we read things, you'll see very often, this person is the son of this person, or related to that. We can trace back their lineage to, through whom they come. All we know about Melchizedek is that he was a priest of God that was acknowledged by Abraham as a priest of Yahweh, and that Abraham gave this Melchizedek a tenth of all that he had. He gave him a tithe. This is the patriarch of the entire Jewish race and all the people. So they find themselves symbolically giving themselves a tithe to this man through their patriarch, their ancestor. So we're going to mention these things today and also tomorrow. We're going to go on to some of that in a little bit of detail, but it's going to be mentioned as something that you should already know about. Because again, to whom is this letter being sent? It's being sent to Jews. Well, Jews know these things. Certainly the ruling class of the Jews know them. And if you attend synagogue every week as you're supposed to do, then you too should know these stories as well. Continuing on. Verse 7. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, same word in Greek as complete, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. About this we have much to say, and it is hard to explain since you have become dull of hearing. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk and not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, since he is a child. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. Now, Joel chapter 2. Blow a trumpet in Zion. Sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yahweh is coming. It is near. A day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Remember, the people to whom this is being given were expecting that when the day of the Lord comes, it's going to be a day of celebration. We're going to finally crush all those people who aren't Jews, those who aren't Israelites, who aren't of the circumcised, who aren't of the lineage of Abraham, are going to be celebrating and dancing on the graves of everybody around them. That's what they were expecting to happen. So hearing this instead, that it's going to be a day of darkness and gloom and a day of clouds and thick darkness, is terrifying to them. Like blackness. There is spread upon the mountain a great and powerful people. Their like has never been before, nor will be again after them, through the years of all generations. Fire devours before them, and flame behind them burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, but behind them, a desolate wilderness, and nothing escapes them. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like war horses they run. As with the rumbling of chariots, they leap on the tops of mountains, like the crackling of a flame of fire, devouring the stubble. Like a powerful army drawn up for battle. Before them, peoples are in anguish. All faces grow pale. Like warriors, they charge. Like soldiers, they scale the wall. They march each on his way. They do not swerve from their paths. They do not jostle one another. Each marches in his path. They burst through the weapons and are not halted. They leap upon the city. They run up on the walls. They climb up into the houses. They enter through the windows like a thief. The earth quakes before them. The heavens tremble. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. Yahweh utters his voice before his army, before his army. This is the army of God. This is when the Israelites are supposed to be dancing and screaming about how wonderful things are. Saying, this is what's coming for you. For his camp, God's camp, is exceedingly great. He who executes his word is powerful. For the day of Yahweh is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? Yet even now, declares Yahweh, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning, and rend your hearts, and not your garments. Rending your clothes is an outward show of something that's happening. He says, what we need is a rending of your hearts, of who you are. Return to Yahweh your God. For he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and he relents over disaster. Who knows whether he will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him, a grain offering and a drink offering for Yahweh your God. Blow the trumpet in Zion, consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, consecrate the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children, even nursing infants. Let the bridegroom leave his room and the bride her chamber. Between the vestibule and the altar, let the priests, the ministers of Yahweh, weep and say, spare your people, O Yahweh, and make not your heritage a reproach, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the peoples, where is their God? Then Yahweh became jealous for his land and had pity on his people. Yahweh answered and said to his people, behold, I am sending to you grain, wine, and oil, and you will be satisfied. And I will no more make you a reproach among the nations. I will remove the northerner far from you, and drive him into a parched and desolate land, his vanguard into the eastern sea, and his rear guard into the western sea. The stench and foul smell of him will rise, for he has done great things. Fear not, O land. Be glad and rejoice, for Yahweh has done great things. Fear not, you beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness are green. The tree bears its fruit, the fig tree and the vine give their full yield. Be glad, O children of Zion, and rejoice in Yahweh your God, for he has given the early rain for your vindication. He has poured down for you abundant rain, the early and the latter rain as before. The threshing floors shall be full of grain, the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the hopper, the destroyer, and the cutter, my great army which I sent among you. You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of Yahweh your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never again be put to shame. You shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am Yahweh your God, and there is no one else. And my people shall never again be put to shame. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. Even on the male and female servants, in those days I will pour out my spirit, and I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. And the sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the great and awesome day of Yahweh comes. And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls upon the name of Yahweh shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those who escape, as Yahweh has said, and among the survivors shall be those whom Yahweh calls. Now Psalm 142. With my voice I cry out to Yahweh. With my voice I plead for mercy to Yahweh. I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him. When my spirit faints within me, you know my way. In the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see. There is none who takes notice of me. No refuge remains to me. No one cares for my soul. I cry to you, O Yahweh. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Attend to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. That's it. That's all the reading and all of the notes for today. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.